Folders and files, permissions and attributes in Windows operating systems. NOS 130, RCC Summer Semester 2011. Let's begin with a quick review of some of the terminology and concepts from our earlier lessons. It is always better if we start out on the same page. Today we will focus on one aspect of how the computer manages data. Manipulation will be for another time. Please recall that a folder in Windows may also be called a directory, or even a subdirectory when it resides inside another folder. We will learn that every individual file may be assigned its own set of attributes and permissions. It's important to note that the types of permissions and attributes available for use are defined by the file management system used by the operating system. Current Windows operating systems all utilize the NTFS format. Permissions and attributes are the tools that Windows provides for users to place access restrictions on files and folders. They act as the bouncer at the fancy nightclub. If you're not on the list, you don't get in. Fortunately, you get to write all of the lists, and Windows can support many permission lists. Hopefully, one of the first questions you had was something like, why are there restrictions on what I can see and do with my folders on my computer? And hopefully, almost as quickly, you remembered how someone you know had to totally reinstall their operating system because some critical file was deleted accidentally. So we acknowledge and accept that Microsoft designers have our best interest at heart when setting the default permissions. Their plug-and-play philosophy makes computing easy and safe for most users. As we explore the available permissions, we must identify just who those permissions will apply to. This lesson will familiarize you with the available attributes and permissions so that when you need to create a new user, modify a current user's rights, or even create a new group of users, you will have the knowledge of the permissions to enable you to proceed successfully. Okay, here they are, and since we have some time, let's discuss them. If you have full control, that means you own the nightclub. You can do anything with a file or a folder, objects, that the computer can do. Create them, delete them, read, write, modify, change, rename, you name it. If you have full control permission, you can do it. If you have the modify permission, it's like you're the hottest celebrity in the known universe. You can do everything except take ownership. That is, a full control administrator can designate a user to be responsible for the permissions on a folder or a file. A modify permitted user cannot take ownership and therefore change the permissions available on that file. Read and execute. Okay, no more nightclub references. But it is just what it says. You can read and execute through the folders, through the files, but you cannot make changes to the existing objects or add any new ones. Listing folder contents is a permission for folders. Really. It doesn't mention in the name, but you're also allowed execution privileges. That is, you can open the folders and execute files within those folders. The read permission, you can see it all, but that's it. The write permission allows you to add files and subdirectories in the folders that you are permitted to see. Those are the permissions that are generally considered the standard permissions, and knowing that is half the battle. Finding them is the other half, and let's do that now. In order to have access to folder and file permissions, many times you will have to change your operating system's default setting. I will open my computer by double-clicking on the icon, either here or from the Start menu. I will use the Tools menu and drop down to Folder Options. In the Folder Options window, I will select the View tab. In the Advanced Settings, I will scroll to the very end. Windows defaults to use simple file sharing, and that simply means that the operating system will use default settings for all of the file sharing security properties. We're going to uncheck that box and apply. Oh, for fun, let's just open my C drive. And here's a popular file folder called sysinternals. I will right click on that and choose the properties. The properties window has a security tab. Opening the security tab allows me to see a group of users as well as the permissions list, and as I change a user, the permissions change, reflected by that user's definition. You can see we have full control, modify, read and execute, the whole list, including one at the bottom called special permissions, which I don't have permission to use, so we will scroll back up. The users on the computer can be created by the system designers and are on every computer that ships, or can be created by you as an administrator. Creating users, modifying users is beyond the scope of understanding those permissions. We will deal with that in an upcoming lesson. Simply put, I can choose the full control property. I can click in the allow button, or I can click in the deny. And as the administrator, I can determine the permissions level for the user selected. I simply make the selections that I like and apply those selections. And that's all there is to assigning permissions to a folder. Now we have a test.txt, and we'll look at the properties on that. It's just a file, a text file. I don't even remember if I wrote anything in it. But as you can see in the properties window, a security tab shows the system users and the list of available permissions. And again, for just this one file, I can choose to set the permissions or deny the permissions to a user and click apply. This means that the administrator has control of which users can see which folders, or write to new folders, or change existing folders. In this way, the administrator restricts access to the system's informations. And that sums up permissions. So let's talk now about attributes. If we continue to use the office filing cabinet metaphor for our computer's organizations of folders and files, we can think of attributes as the brightly colored sticky notes that we add to the corner of the folders that quickly remind us about something specific to those folders. For example, The folder containing all of our original documents has a red sticky. We know that we can take these out and Xerox them, but we cannot write on them. The red sticky is our read-only attribute. It tells us this folder is for reading only. The folder that we use to keep the weekly messages and we type up and put into storage at the end of every Friday shift gets a blue sticky. And when we open the file and see the blue sticky, we know this is the archived messages. The NTFS uses an archived attribute. An attribute is a piece or pieces of information that we attach to a folder or file to tell the operating system how to handle or how to be aware of the data within that file. Specifically, there are 6 attributes in the Windows operating systems that can be applied to files or folders. Again, we see a list. We'll talk a little bit about them. The read-only attribute will apply to the files within a folder when it is selected as a folder attribute. It does not apply to a folder of itself. That directory cannot be read-only by use of the Properties dialog box, even though there's a read-only checkbox in the Properties dialog box. It's an issue that has existed in Windows operating systems probably since Windows 2000. The hidden attribute will tell the operating system to prevent the file or folder from being displayed during normal operation. There are 4 advanced attributes. The archive attribute is set by the operating system to indicate that a file or folder has changed since the last backup operation, thereby marking it as needing to be backed up. The index attribute is used by the operating system to allow very efficient search models. It speeds up the time for searches. The compression attribute tells the operating system to always compress a particular file or folder when storing it to a volume. And the encryption attribute causes the operating system to store the data using a 128-bit encryption process keyed to the operating system's root. So now we know what they are. Let's go find them. Oh, here's a new text document on my desktop. Let's right-click and view the properties. Please recall that during the permissions section of this lesson, we revealed the security tab for folders and files by going through the Folders Options menu. The General tab in the Properties dialog box at the bottom will show 2 attributes that we discussed, the read-only and the hidden. And since I've selected a file as opposed to a folder, I can check the read-only and apply that attribute to that file. The Advanced button will reveal the 4 remaining attributes we discussed. You can see 2 are selected by default and 2 are unselected by default. We'll accept the defaults because we trust Microsoft designers. Since I've saved the read-only file and applied it, should I choose to open the file? Looks like gaming information from one of my silly games. I will add some text. Adding text for demonstration. Now I will save my file. And I have an error that I cannot create this text document because it is a read-only file. I will select OK. It will ask me if I want to save it with a different name. I will cancel and I will close. And it will again tell me that I've made changes that have not been saved, and I know that I cannot save them. So I will select No. If I were to choose a file, here's one called a folder, School Papers, and select Properties. Please note the read-only box has a green highlight, not a check mark. I can make it hidden and apply it. It will say I've added the hide attribute, and I'll select OK. Please note the School Papers folder shaded out. That's because I also used my folders options view tab to show hidden files and folders. If I unselect that and apply it, my School Papers has now disappeared. The hidden attribute during normal operation will cause the operating system to not display a hidden file or folder. And before I forget, I'm going to turn it back on. And down here, my School Papers has been restored. It still appears grayed out because it is still a hidden folder. I will deselect and apply, and confirm, and it is back to brightly colored. We have discussed permissions and attributes in the Windows operating systems and how they allow an administrator to control access and therefore provide security to the data on his Windows operating system computer. I see we have a couple of moments, so I'll entertain questions from the audience. Yes. Yes, you may not have heard. She asked if the Macintosh operating systems also used permissions and attributes. We'll have to have another class about that. I thank you all for your time, and I hope you all have a pleasant day.